Hello, and welcome to the Week 8 version of the awards and futures look ahead here. And we're going to pivot to something that you can still get involved in. You can still play all the way through the rest of the season. And so we figured, well, let's try to provide some value with looking at these awards markets, looking at these futures markets, looking at these updated win totals. Because remember, all of this stuff is dynamic. All these prices continue to move. And we want to see if there's any value left out there. So, Stephen, look, let's just kick things off here with a very, very basic. And I don't think we are going to get wild here or whatever, but, let's go ahead and look at the Super Bowl odds. And, the Bills are your short shot, as they should be. Eagles, Chiefs are the only three teams that are in single digits. And then you kind of really jump up into the double-digit teams outside of there. You and I do a power rankings every week. We did a power rankings debate yesterday. The one thing we all agreed on is that it's Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, and everybody else. And so I don't know if in good faith I could say to anybody to get a different Super Bowl ticket in their account. I did tell you guys that I feel like the Bengals are on at least the right trajectory, that they are at least on the upward swing, where I think everybody else we're looking at is kind of at least is either neutral or on the downswing. So, I mean, maybe when it comes to that, but outside of that, man, it's real hard for me to make a case for anybody outside of the Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles.
For sure. The one big thing I'll note is that the Bills' price at this point is shorter at this juncture of the season than any team we've seen over the past couple of years. We haven't been at week 8 of the NFL season and had a Super Bowl favorite shorter than 3-1 in quite some time. So this is still a violent sport we play. There is attrition. If injuries hit the Bills, then that's going to create value for other spots, but that's a tough spot to be in to try and find value elsewhere. So that's the first thing I'll say, is that if you believe the Bills are somewhat vulnerable, that by definition with these prices is creating value elsewhere. But I do really believe that this is a tier of 2 in the AFC, and trying to find a price on anybody else other than the Bills or the Chiefs is, I think, folly at this point. The NFC, I think, is really interesting, though, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's why if you go to the NFC side of things, I mean, look, I guess we could make a case. Obviously, the Eagles are the class of the NFC, but if we can make a case, I think, for the 49ers or the Vikings, both teams for different reasons. The 49ers, not necessarily because they're in line to maybe get the 1 seed, but because we assume that they are going to get healthier down the line. Now, you're making a bet on them getting healthier because this version of the 49ers ain't winning the Super Bowl, but we are hoping that they get healthier down the line, certainly for the stretch run when it matters. And then from a Viking standpoint, you'd be making a bet on the Vikings that, hey, look, They are still a very, very big player for the number 1 overall seed. They could get a bye when it's all said and done. And listen, if you get a free win in the playoffs, Stephen, that is so incredibly massive. So there's at least a case to be made for the Vikings just strictly from that standpoint.
For sure. The schedule sets up nicely for Minnesota. However, of the two, I would be more inclined to take a shot on the 49ers than the Vikings. I am of the opinion that the Vikings have played a very soft schedule, and their record has been inflated a little bit here. You and I disagree on this. You have them 5 in our rankings this week. I have them 10, and the rest of our staff is somewhere in the middle here. I look at their metrics, and their defense has not been very good. It's been pretty poor, actually. It's been bottom 5 in the league in yards per play allowed. And their offense, maybe they straighten things out here after the bye week with a new coach and they get rolling a little bit better. But to this point, even with a soft schedule, they're just league average in terms of yards per play. So I need to see more from Minnesota before I believe they actually can do something in the playoffs once they get there. I think they can put themselves in a good position seed-wise in the playoffs, but I'm still skeptical that they can actually get it done against these upper-tier NFC teams. That's why I think the Niners are the better gamble here if you're looking to fade the Eagles. And listen, the Eagles are the rightful favorite here, Matt, but we would be remiss without at least acknowledging that they've played a very soft schedule as well. And how would they look against a fully healthy 49ers team? I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I always just go back to, right, I just always go back to quarterback play. Quarterback play wins in the NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo is not good. He's certainly the worst of any of the teams that we've mentioned so far, and that includes Kirk Cousins. That includes, obviously, Joe Burrow, obviously Patrick Mahomes, obviously. It's just one of those things where Josh Allen as well. So I get you. But again, I guess what we're looking at here, the best price you can get on Cincinnati, if you wanted the longest shot of the teams we talked about, you can find 22-1 on Cincinnati. So, I mean, there is that's still available out there. Best price you're going to find on the Niners is 17-1. Best price you're going to find on the Vikings is 16-1. So
those aren't the long shots I'm most interested in, though, Matt. Those aren't the ones.
From a Super Bowl?
Not from a Super Bowl standpoint. Are we going to talk conference odds too?
Yeah,
because the Seattle Seahawks and the NFC are the team I'm looking at.
So let's head over to the conference odds. And, again, this mirrors Super Bowl odds and everything like that. But we certainly can find some longer shot here because, look, they don't have to win the Super Bowl, right? And specifically in the NFC side, they don't have to beat one of these AFC teams that we've just talked about. Like, again, we know the Bills and Chiefs are elite. I think the Bengals are on their way to being elite. And so with that being the case, you're going to have to get through one of those three teams. And that's a pretty daunting task. As we said, right now, it's just the Eagles and everybody else. And that when there's only one Goliath to slay, that is way, way easier along the way there, Stephen.
Would it shock anybody if the Seahawks were to beat, say, the Vikings or the Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs and then come back and beat like the Rams in the playoffs or something like that? Whatever order you want to put it in. If they can avoid the Eagles in the divisional round, would it shock anybody to see Seattle beat a couple of these other teams in the NFC? At this point, it really wouldn't shock me. Their offense continues to put up the monster numbers despite the early season criticisms that they haven't played anybody. And this young defense, statistically, is showing improvement. They went from one of the worst defenses in the league through the first month, and now the past few weeks, they're putting up above average defensive performances, 5.1 yards per play allowed. Last year, league average was 5.5. They've shown a lot of improvement here. Hand to God, I was dead wrong about this team early in the season, beginning of the year, and we need to give credit where credit is due here. So I'm thinking that at least some lunch money on the Seahawks to win the NFC at 50-1 is not a completely out of this mind, insane idea that they can at least get to the NFC title game if the seeding breaks their way.
So 50-1 best price you are going to find on them. And again, look, in a conference where I don't think we think anybody's good outside of the Eagles right now. I think we think that that there are maybe some teams with potential, but I don't think we think that anybody is good outside of the Eagles right now. And so why not the Seahawks? Listen, we'll find out this week. Obviously, huge test for them as us, looking at. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the who's for real bowl this week, right? I mean, it's the Seahawks and Giants, and it is basically two teams that have greatly overperformed to this point, and it's who's for real, and we're going to find out this week. But again, 50-1, and again, you're not going to get 50-1 if they are able to knock off the Giants, because again, the Giants technically ahead of them in the standings and things like that as it is right now. So, if that's something you want to get in your account, by all means, definitely go and plop that in there. On the AFC side, like I said, no value for me. I mean, look, Bills, Chiefs, it's just, I'm not betting those short shots or anything like that. So we'll kind of leave that alone. I do want to head to this to make the playoffs, and I want to get your opinion here and see if this is something maybe any of our viewers or listeners want to get in on. But Stephen, what do we believe about the New York Football Jets? And do we believe that they are going to turn into a pumpkin? Because the no price on them to make the playoffs is down to all the way to -165 for the no on the New York Jets. And listen, it's a fine story. I think the franchise has actually done pretty well in the draft. I think they did well in free agency. I actually think this is a franchise on the upswing. I just think this is a year too early. And I truly believe if you kind of look at the advanced metrics, I mean, they have been winning games, but they've been winning games really unimpressively. And to only have to lay -165 for the Jets to miss the playoffs seems like a pretty interesting bet for me right now. One that I would get in on as we sit here in week 8.
Can't say I disagree with you. Look at the schedule coming up. New England this week, they are a dog in that game. Buffalo, loss. Another game against New England, that one at New England, so they'll be an even bigger dog in that off the bye. Interesting that 2 of their next 3 games are against New England, so we're going to find out pretty quick here if they're for real a playoff team or not as a wild card. Obviously, we need to take into account here that there's 3 wild cards now, not 2 like there used to be, so that adds a little extra wiggle room here. You can basically be a 500 team and maybe sneak in here. They still have games against Chicago, Detroit, and Jacksonville. So that could help them. But if you look at the current playoff picture as we sit about halfway through the season here, they're ahead of Miami and the LA Chargers, but there's a slew of teams behind them currently outside the playoff picture I think could jump them at some point here. The Bengals are obviously one of them. The Patriots would be the other. I think the Colts are DEA dead. I'm not worried about them. And the Raiders aren't dead yet, I don't think. That offense is good enough. Schedule should help them a little bit. Broncos don't look like as tough of a matchup in their division. Chargers don't look like as tough of a matchup in their division. I don't think the Raiders are dead yet. So that's probably the shortest price we're going to get on the Jets, considering the next 3 games that they have to play.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's actually a 161 out there in the market on the no to make the playoffs. This is a team that's 24th in the NFL. And listen, despite the record, and again, it's a fine story. And again, I'm actually bullish, kind of long term on this franchise.
They don't have a quarterback. Zach Wilson is not good.
They're 24th. They're 24th in EPA per play still in the NFL. I mean, that is still behind teams like the Titans, the Bears, the Bucks, like all these teams that have been what we think to be inept on offense. Like they're still behind them when it comes to all that. So I think there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors going on here. So as far as a futures bet that I would get in my account today, minus 161 on the Jets to miss the playoffs is something that I think is a pretty good bet today that I could get into my account.
Who do you like better? That price with the Jets or basically the same exact price with the now Sam Ehlinger Colts to miss the playoffs?
I actually think both of those are tickets to get into your account, because I think what the Colts have done at this point is by moving to Ehlinger and saying that they have moved to him for the rest of the season, Stephen, I think what the franchise and Jim Irsay and all of them have done is they're like, hey, listen, we're done with this musical quarterback stuff. Like we're done with this. Like we know what it's like to have a franchise quarterback. We had Peyton Manning and we had Andrew Luck. Like we know what it's like to be able to go out there and know that your quarterback is going to put you in the best position to win games that there is. And we're not doing this anymore. And you go to Ehlinger and what do? You lose some games. You try to get in that upper half of the draft. We know there's at least 4 or 5, maybe even 6 first-round graded quarterbacks that are coming out in the draft this year. As long as you have one of those like middle-ish picks, you can still try and trade up to with one of these other teams to get up there and get one of these elite quarterbacks. Like I think that has become the plan for the Colts. And so I'm glad you pointed that one out, because I think both of those are really, really good to get into your account right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
A little bit further. Listen, everybody likes to bet the MVP, and so I do want to touch on that real quick and just let everyone know where we stand. Josh Allen, your favorite, rightfully so, as he should be. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts are just behind him. I think all 3 of those guys, Steven, here's the deal. You talk about it. Football's a violent game. I think it would take multiple injuries for one of those 3 guys to not like win this, because again, even if Allen goes down, that's going to put Mahomes and the Chiefs in the driver's seat to win the AFC and whatnot. And Hurts, just from his counting stats alone, I mean, the guy's already got, the guy's got running back numbers at quarterback, and he's throwing the ball pretty efficiently. He's going to have the counting stats if something were to happen to both Allen and Mahomes. And so, like, outside of those 3, right, is there at least a Cinderella story that could possibly get someone in the mix? And then maybe if you have that ticket in your account, you can play off of that with the favorite as we get closer down the line. I mean, look, you brought up the Seahawks already. Geno Smith is out there. I think the better bet, and you and I talked about this on a podcast already, but I think the better bet is for Pete Carroll to win Coach of the Year, because I look, as great a story as the Geno Smith thing is, I don't think he's going to end up with the counting stats to overcome an Allen, Mahomes, and a Hurts, and probably not even a Burrow at this point if Cincinnati turns it on. like that's like, like they could. Burrow just threw for 480 yards. I mean, like he's going to have counting stats just out the ass, right? So I just don't think Geno can get there. I know it's probably a fun ticket to have in your account, but I don't know how viable it is.
In that situation, I think we would go away from kind of the, for lack of a better term, Heisman model, where you're kind of giving a little bit of more credit to teams with the better records. Mm-hmm. And we would just go straight stats at that point. If it's not going to be Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, that's kind of how I feel the voters would operate in that situation. Because we've seen it happen in previous years as well, where they gave it to Lamar Jackson and he had the best stats over everybody else. So I don't see a path for Geno Smith winning it. I agree with you. The angle here is Pete Carroll at Coach of the Year.
Yes. Or Geno as Comeback Player of the Year. Right? I
think that requires an injury too at this point, though, with
Saquon. To Saquon. But I'm saying, like, if I wanted a Geno Smith ticket, I'd rather have the Comeback Player of the Year ticket in my account than the MVP ticket, because I think there's at least a path to the Comeback Player thing where I think the MVP is just not going to get there. There's too many guys to overcome that are going to be on good teams, right? I mean, Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow. And if you think that the Ravens get things fixed, Lamar, whatever, I think there's just too many guys that are going to have super impressive statistics for him to overcome. But like you said, it's basically a head-to-head, I think, at this point between him and Saquon.
For sure. And Saquon is a huge favorite at this point. He's around minus 225, depending on where you look. Geno is the second choice, about plus 450. So, we do need an injury in that situation, but the favorite does play the position that gets injured the most. So there's always that possibility. But I think those two markets are kind of tied. If the Seahawks make the playoffs, then they're absolutely both live, Geno Smith and Pete Carroll to win the award. And I'd much rather have a price that's, 4 times, 5 times as big with Pete Carroll to win Coach of the Year over a plus 450 Geno Smith here.
Are we, before we move off of MVP, is there any story of any of these super long shots that maybe could play their way into contention that you could then at that point hedge off and make sure to so Daniel Jones is still 80-1, right? Kirk Cousins is still 40-1. If the Vikings go 15-2 or 14-3, or say the Giants actually prove to be for real, and this isn't all smoke and mirrors, and they are 12-5 or whatever, something like that. Those guys are at least going to be in the conversation, right? And if you have an 80-1 in your account or a 40-1 in your account from a Cousins or a Jones, then you can start playing off of the market like we talked about before, right? You can basically just kind of live trade this. And, if your guy gets home, awesome, you've got the 80 or the 40. And if not, then, come in on the short shot and at least ensure yourself a steak dinner or something like that.
So if Mahomes and Allen are healthy, there's no chance. But if they were both to get hurt, then I think you at least have to look at Saquon Barkley if they make the playoffs, but he has to stay healthy the entire season. If you extrapolate his scrimmage yards per game out over the entire season, we're talking about over a 17-game stretch, 2,200 scrimmage yards for Saquon Barkley this year. That would get voters' attention for sure. But this has traditionally been a quarterback award over the past decade or so, and it would take a lot of quarterback injuries for Saquon to finally be in this mix. And I can't see him being voted on. First. I can't see him being voted on over, even if we take out Allen Mahomes, he's not going to get the votes over Jalen Hurts, whose team might win 15 games, Lamar Jackson, who's their entire offense, or Joe Burrow, who is resurrecting their season and obviously has the pedigree to put up monster numbers from a passing game standpoint. Yeah.
I'll tell you this, Steven, before we get out of here, we want to talk to you guys about some bets that we would put into our accounts today. And listen, it's certainly not a sexy ticket, but I'll put it this way. Jalen Hurts for Offensive Player of the Year at 4-1, because it's going to be, I feel like if there was ever a year where they will give this, because typically Offensive Player of the Year, they want to give it to the wide receiver or the running back or whatever, because it's kind of like, hey, you can't win MVP anymore because it's a quarterback award. So here's your consolation prize. I actually think with Jalen Hurts, because of the counting stats that he is likely to have, again, he's going to have double-digit rushing touchdowns. He's going to throw for 20-plus touchdowns. He's got like his overall body of work is going to be so incredibly impressive that I think they might actually kind of give Offensive Player of the Year to him as the consolation prize, where it's kind of like, hey, man, look, sucks we can't give you MVP because, Josh Allen exists in this world or Patrick Mahomes exists in this world, but here's your consolation prize of Offensive Player of the Year because, dude, this season was amazing.
Here's my hesitancy with that, Matt. If you look at the way the voting has broken down over, since 2014 or so, last 8 or 9 years, the quarterbacks that have won Offensive Player of the Year have also won MVP. It's been situations where like somebody's gone scorched earth and the voters, for whatever reason, don't break up their ballot and do it that way. So it's been like a Cam Newton who won it. When Patrick Mahomes threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, they gave him both awards. And I don't know how, but somehow they gave Matt Ryan the award too, to go with his MVP. So just keep that in mind, that in my mind, it's more likely for Josh Allen to go completely scorched earth here and the voters to be lazy and just give him both awards. And he's 12-1 and Hurts is 4-1. So the other
there's actually
a
6-1. There is a 6-1 available in the market out there on Hurts. Just
okay,
keep that in mind. Like, look, I'm not saying it's likely, but what I am saying is like it's 6-1. And I think you and I both agree, like, he's going to have ridiculous stat line. I mean, his stat line is going to be absurd, right? And so it might not be as absurd as Josh Allen, but like, I'm just wondering, because all those years that you're talking about, though, all those guys just lapped the field when it came to statistics. And like, while Allen will likely edge him out when it comes to just raw statistics, he's not going to just blow past him, right? He's not going to like lap the field with everything. And so that's why I think it's just not out of the realm of possibility for them to kind of look at him and say, hey, bro, this was a ridiculous season. And so here's your consolation prize, essentially.
Definitely not out of the realm of possibility, but I'll tell you how I bet this market just last week, and I decided to enter it. I hadn't made any bets yet on Offensive Player of the Year with the given, or not the given, but with the understanding that 4 of the past 5 years, this has been a non-quarterback award. We're seeing it start to turn into voters looking for the best non-quarterback on offense to give this award to. So with that in mind, I do think there's value on some long shots here, considering that we have 3 quarterbacks in the top 6 on the board right now. So if those trends continue with the voters, and when we're talking about trends in betting, I do think it holds a little bit more weight when we're talking about a human voted on award as opposed to statistical anomalies or regression, et cetera. So with those quarterbacks near the top, that by definition means I think there's opportunity further down the board. Tyreek Hill at 14-1. First of all, he's at this point in the season where he is 3rd among all offensive weapons in scrimmage yards per game. He also is the leader in receiving yards. So if the Miami Dolphins continue on this track where they do well and they make the playoffs in their first season, Tyreek Hill is going to get a ton of credit for that, because nobody looks at Tua and thinks that it's his talent that's carrying this offense. It's a combination of scheme and Tyreek Hill's absurd speed and athleticism piling up a bunch of yards. The other name I'll mention is Christian McCaffrey. He is still 50-1 at one spot. He is a sexy name, obviously. He has put up monster numbers in Carolina before getting traded to keep him at least in this conversation. He was never going to win the award in Carolina because the team was so bad. But now that he's in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan's scheme and a quarterback who everybody understands is putting up numbers in spite of him not being a good quarterback, Christian McCaffrey has an opportunity here if he continues the volume that he got in Carolina and the efficiency in which he's put up his entire career. He's about 170 yards behind Saquon Barkley. In this offense, I think 50-1 is not priced correctly with his chances to win this award and potentially put up 2,000 scrimmage yards and double-digit touchdowns with the 49ers. So those are the 2 names that I sprinkled in for Offensive Player of the Year.
I lied. I'm going to do one more, and that's Offensive Rookie of the Year. And guys, this is why this is going to be a great video every week, because all these markets are updated weekly. It's going to be awesome for us to debate. In the comment section, let us know, like, what do you want us to talk about? What do you want us to debate? What bets do you have in your account? What bets are you looking to make this week? Please let us know in the comments. We'll talk about it this week. I promise. Next video. Steve, quickly though, Offensive Rookie of the Year. It is now moved overnight to Kenneth Walker as the favorite. And listen, he just now got his opportunity because the guy in front of him blew his knee out and is gone for the rest of the season. Like you talked about it earlier with the running back position with Saquon Barkley. Listen, it is the position that is far easiest for people to get injured. Him at 2-1 and Dameon Pierce at 3-1. I think this Offensive Rookie of the Year category is still wide open. My only advice here is do not bet either one of those dudes. The odds are not going to get that much worse on them. If you want to bet them in 2 or 3 weeks, the odds are basically going to be the same. I promise you. And 2, I think now's the time to really throw a dart on some of these dudes that may or may not, assert themselves as kind of like number ones throughout the rest of the season and really put up some numbers, namely like a Pickens, namely like even if you wanted to go Kenny Pickett, they're not going to win a lot of games, but he's going to have a lot of counting stats. Like they're going to be throwing a ton and he's going to have a lot of counting stats. Wan'Dale Robinson has now become the de facto number 1 for the New York Giants. If that team goes on a run, he will have to play a big role in all of that. All of these guys you can get at 20-1 or longer. And so it's just something I think that in that market specifically, we should be paying attention to.
For sure. Dameon Pierce is a guy I had from the preseason. I think I had him like around 40 or 50-1. So obviously he's got a ton of talent, but he's on a team that's not going to win a lot of games. So I think that opens up some opportunity down a little bit further. Kenneth Walker, I think, is the rightful favorite at this point. The name that seems interesting to me, Matt, is Chris Olave, because the rest of their receivers cannot stay healthy. If he gets even average quarterback play rest of the season, this is a guy that could have, monster yards compared to the other rookies at his position. And then it becomes a conversation of who had the more impressive season between him and these 2 running backs.
I thought Ryan Tannehill was going to miss some time. They're saying he's fine. Steven, I wanted to come on here and say Malik Willis at 100-1 and putting in a ticket for a dart throw would be worth it. It looks like Tannehill's going to be okay. So with that, he can't kind of get Wally pipped. He can't really lose the job. I was thinking maybe he was going to miss some time and Malik Willis would have a chance to kind of just show that he's the better option. And with that, maybe put up some really good stats here over the second half of the season. But it looks like Tannehill's going to be okay. I will throw this out there, though, as the caveat, Steven. If Tannehill does have to miss this week for whatever reason, and he has to miss some time, it is worth a dart throw on Malik Willis because that team is now the favorite to win that division. They are likely to make the playoffs at this point, and he is going to do some things that Ryan Tannehill can't do. And I think, again, with the propensity to want to give this to a quarterback, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, and having 100-1 ticket in your account would feel pretty good. I'll put it that way.
That was the long shot I circled too, Matt.
Yep.
But we're in agreement. He's got to play or you got no shot.
Guys, again, we're going to do this every week. This is fun. And so please let us know in the comment section or tweet at me and Steven, at Steven Anders1, at Matt Brown M2. Let us know what you want us to talk about, what markets you want us to focus on. We'll give you your thoughts. And again, in the comments, let us know how you are betting these markets, what bets you're putting in your account. What are you considering? This is super fun as these things continue to change. Good luck on all your bets here in week 8.